I have 2 ults.
Wait, we get back, yeah?
I have 2 ults, I have 2 ults.
Sorry. Get in that bitch.
Turrets everywhere, they can't do shit, they can't do shit, I have 2 ults.
Tell him.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell.
I mean... LOL?
No, 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 no.
If you're a new player, it is highly recommended that you follow the build from left to right. Once you're more comfortable with item purchases, you can try exploring other options, and this isn't just for my guide, but for any guide. The gameplay loop is as follows. Survive or win the lane into investing most of your AP points, or ability points, into your ultimate till it is max level. And once it's max level, start using the zipline to rotate to lanes so that you can gank for your allies or play for objectives like the urn or mid-boss. You do this every time your ultimate is off cooldown. If your ultimate is on cooldown, use that time to box/statue max while completely ignoring the jungle or neutral camps, leaving it for your teammates. Prioritize constantly pushing out empty lanes above all else. This is super important, by the way. And if there are no nearby lanes to push out, then look for, as I said before, in order, sinners, boxes, and statues. So again, I will repeat one more time. Survive or win the lane. Max your ultimate, then go gank. When your ultimate is on cooldown, prioritize pushing all nearby waves, and once the waves are pushed in, look for sinners, followed by boxes and statues. Once your ultimate is off cooldown again, look for a fight. Just repeat these in a gameplay loop, and you're good to go. I would like to emphasize that pushing out the wave is the single most important thing you can do in Deadlock. Everything starts with pushing out the wave. If you aren't pushing out the waves, you aren't playing Deadlock correctly. Even many high-level Eternus players struggle to do this properly, so if you can learn how to push out the wave better than these Eternus players, you will have a strong foundation as a new Deadlock player. So how the build works. We are mainly trying to maximize damage output from our ultimate as early as possible by putting all of our AP or ability points into Heavy Barrage. The reason we do this is because the damage output from turrets at the start of the game to mid-game is generally very poor. McGinnis also heavily relies on her gun to make it through the laning phase, and since turrets aren't that good yet, they act as more of a distraction rather than a consistent source of damage. Since we don't always scale gun items, the laning phase is going to be the most challenging part of the game. And finally, during any downtime, we should be doing a lot of box/statue runs when our ult is on cooldown because our neutral clear is very slow. A common question is why not max turrets first? Turrets don't deal enough reliable damage early on. When I say reliable damage, I mean damage that leads to kills. You can think of it like Pocket's ult, Affliction, which deals significant damage over time, but it can't finish the job. The damage doesn't lead to kills. Maxing turrets first is okay sometimes, but it just doesn't have enough solo kill potential. They're stationary, fights can shift locations, they have no fall-off damage received, so they die pretty quickly. We max our ultimate first to have more control over the game by having higher solo kill potential. and turrets are worse than ult early, but it can sometimes become better than your ultimate mid to late game, which more of will be shown later. Ugh, they got me. Monster Rounds is simply a tool to push out the wave as quickly as possible, especially in lane. If you push out the wave as fast as possible by killing all 4 troopers, the enemies will have no time to be interacting with you and your trooper wave at the same time. This means you can harass them from a distance, applying gun pressure, despite not primarily building gun items at all. The goal is to focus primarily on shoving the wave so enemies have as little time and space to interact with you and your ally as possible. If they try to fight you while you killed all their troopers, they will be taking massive damage from your trooper wave, your ally, and yourself, putting them at a huge disadvantage. Optionally, you can also buy Close Quarters if you want more direct damage to enemy heroes, especially considering you can trap them with wall, taking full advantage of the 20% melee resist and 20% weapon damage, though your wave clear will be a bit worse considering the bonuses from Monster Rounds is multiplicative. Extra Stamina enables McGinnis to play like a normal 3 stamina character, while also giving us a bit more health, but that's not the main reason why we buy this item. Extra Stamina also upgrades into Arcane Surge, which gives us massive lane sustain. Arcane Surge provides you and your ally with amazing lane sustain and healing Spectre by boosting its healing with the 12% extra ability duration and plus 20 spirit, which also feeds back into the heal for even more heal. Arcane Surge is generally used on the heal most of the time, but it can also be used to surge your turrets in lane or even mid to late game. After your ultimate ability is unlocked, you can also consider surging your ultimate to make it last longer and to hit harder. Extra Charge provides more turret charges, which can be used to push the lane faster / used as a distraction, or can later apply turret pressure to enemies if you have tier 2 turrets, which is a total of 4 turrets. Remember, use the turrets with a goal in mind. I'll be going over this in detail a bit later. Why not buy other gun items to control the laning phase more? You can actually buy gun items, but it's optional since the gun items are largely matchup dependent, or if you get kills in the first few minutes of the game, you can kind of consider doing gun more than following the default build. McGinnis' laning phase, after several nerfs to her gun, her heal, and wall, in addition to some of the most ludicrous heroes we've ever seen, like their power levels are so far above the rest of the cast that it has made it significantly harder to justify buying gun items to take control of the lane sometimes. Like, Intensifying Mag, Active Reload, or Opening Rounds are all fantastic items, but when some of the heroes in this game are just so broken, it kind of doesn't matter sometimes. So yeah, this is the reason why we don't have 4800 gun investment in most situations, due to the current landscape of this patch. As a player who mostly plays gun McGinnis, I can assure you that I have tried many things to make gun viable, but it's just not worth it. I'll be sure to discuss this situation in a different video since it currently isn't relevant to this guide. My recommendations for which gun items to build are listed somewhat in order in the guide. Usually you just choose 2 out of 3 of these, while sometimes buying Fleetfoot for mobility and or box / statue maxing. There are 3 ways to allocate your ability points or AP early. All of them start off with tier 1 wall. The reason we get wall is because sometimes you can isolate an enemy from their ally, allowing you to apply pressure on enemies by shooting them or light meleeing them to chip away at their health. Heavy melee is risky unless they use parry. Or in best case scenarios, you just kill them. Just remember that you don't get the damage up from wall until tier 1 AP is allocated. So after tier 1 wall, we get our heal. After heal, turrets are unlocked. And this is also where we can deviate ability point allocations, of which there are 3 separate paths. The first one is the standard path that the guide also follows, with tier 1 wall into tier 2 turrets into tier 5 ult, which is balanced for laning and ult maxing without delaying it too much. The pros are you can apply more turret pressure, you get more healing from Spectre and allows us to box/statue max for buffs, mainly cooldown reduction and spirit, which definitely helps a lot long term, especially since we don't jungle with this build. The cons are that turrets do feed a decent amount of souls if you don't deny the soul orb, but it's still worth it if you can take their guardian out without too much loss. So always use turrets with a goal in mind. We also have less gun pressure since we're largely investing into spirit items, so don't feel too bad if the lane is lost. We also don't take tier 1 healing Spectre for the 40% spirit resist because generally you will be using the heal to sustain rather than tanking spirit damage from enemies in a more offensive manner, like taking their guardian for example. The second AP path is T1 wall into tier 5 ult. We are literally rushing our ultimate to max out as soon as possible. This means skipping tier 2 turret charges, skipping resist on heal, while only taking tier 1 wall for the amp. The benefit of doing this is that you gain the highest possible damage output with your ultimate as early as possible. But just watch out for stuns, because you are investing all your eggs into one basket. This means you can rotate to other lanes every time your ult is off cooldown and essentially force kills for yourself and your team, and enemies won't really have that much spirit resist this early on. If you end up getting kills, you'll have a lot of souls to further invest into more damage items while also entirely skipping jungle farm since we again are box/statue maxing. The downside is that you are kind of sacking your lane by not having any kind of turret pressure other than the extra charge, but that's usually fine because, you know, turrets suck early on a lot of the time, and skipping the 40% resist on heal, whatever, since you're playing for the max ult to make things happen later anyways. The third AP path is T1 wall into T1 heal into T2 turrets into tier 5 ult. So we're delaying our ultimate by quite a bit, but this also comes with the benefit of more of a hybrid gun build alongside a lot of turrets, meaning you are investing everything into the lane. You'll have amazing turret pressure, 40% spirit resist on the heal, which is amazing offensively, good gun damage if you bought some gun items, and you'll also be able to farm the jungle, which is normally not possible with the other two build paths since they prioritize the ultimate for the most part. The downside is that you're putting all your eggs into one basket, aka the lane, meaning if you don't win the lane, which is killing the enemy heroes and or taking their guardian, it can slow down your build significantly later. Okay, so item build continuation. Mystic Slow is bought relatively early to have your turrets and ult be more annoying. Heavy Barrage especially will slow enemies to a crawl because the T1 from the ult applies a 30% movement slow and a 30% dash slow for enemies. So it's just the perfect debuff item. Mystic Expansion, when applied to Heavy Barrage, increases the area of effect of your ultimate, making it easier to consistently hit your enemies while also being able to predict and follow their movement path much more easily. It also increases the explosion radius of your ultimate, which is the splash damage for targets above your ultimate. This item also lets you hit your 4800 Spirit Spike to gain a massive increase in damage, which helps a lot if you are ult maxing early. Enchanters is the best defensive and offensive vitality item we can buy. Especially in this high spirit damage oriented meta, you will not only reduce a large portion of incoming damage, but also have 15 spirit power and 5% ability cooldown if your health is above 65%. So it's one of the best items in the entire game right now. S tier item for sure. So for compressed cooldown, you should compress your ultimate when it is on cooldown so that you can maximize your purchase for something that gives immediate power rather than buying compress when your ult is not on cooldown, since it does not provide any stats or any buffs whatsoever. Combined with the tier 2 ult, we can lower the cooldown to under 98 seconds, which is huge. Enduring Speed is the most useful item for ult McGinnis, period. The 25% slow resist also works on the self-slow that Heavy Barrage inflicts upon McGinnis herself. The slow resist enables her ultimate to become more movement viable as a result. You'll see just how important this item is later in the video, when I discuss how to use her ultimate, and how to utilize the slow resist to your advantage, as well as several other movement techniques you can employ during the ultimate. So Mystic Vulnerability is the best damage to soul ratio item you can buy, including the fact that it also gives 8% spear resist to yourself. Shred is a damage multiplier to spirit damage, so it increases all spirit damage done to targets, and the higher your enemy's spirit resist, the more effective Shred is. Not to mention, this item also works for your allies, so you can just shred the resist for your allies who can also take advantage of it. Lightning Scroll versus Escalating Exposure. You have two options. The Lightning Scroll is specifically bought against enemy heroes that have channeled abilities like Haze, Dynamo, Seven, and Moe and Krill sometimes. It really isn't that useful against non-channeled abilities, other than the fact that it can kill a little bit of their momentum if they're in the air, and then they just drop down, stun for a little bit, but it's just more annoying than it is useful in that case. So Lightning Scroll offers pretty much no damage, which makes it a bad choice for damage output against certain enemy heroes. That makes Escalating Exposure the best option when you don't need the crowd control stun. Boundless versus Escalating Exposure. The long answer is that the more damage your rockets or turrets deal, the better Escalating Exposure becomes. It's no secret that Escalating will always deal more damage than Boundless if you get close to maximum stacks. But I always thought a large reason for that was because of the Spirit Shred provided by Mystic Vulnerability. So I decided to give Boundless a 1600 soul lead in Mystic Vulnerability to show that Shred is very effective for damage. The result was as you saw, and at around 10 stacks, Escalating overtook Boundless. Granted, Boundless did have a 1600 soul lead, so I did the test again, more fairly, with improved spirit, and the result was around 6 to 7 stacks, Escalating overtook Boundless. I did the test one more time, except this time I gave myself 30 boons, 20 extra spirit power from golden statues, and near max inventory slots to more closely emulate a late game scenario. And the result this time was that around 6 stacks, Escalating did overtake Boundless, the same as before. Now, before we write off Boundless completely, we need to understand a few things. The first is that Boundless is the best source of raw spirit power, which means it applies to all of our abilities, including Healing Spectre and its scaling, while also having the benefit of doing more damage for the first 4.23 seconds, I suppose. The second is that if you combine Boundless with Escalating Exposure, you have two high-tier 6400 damage items. I've been peddling before that Boundless plus Mystic Vulnerability was always more damage from my previous testing, so I was really confused at the results, because I kind of tested it the same way. I don't know. It doesn't matter now. Facts are facts, and Escalating is a very good option for damage after 4.23 seconds of your ult, or even better if your turrets built up stacks for you beforehand. Oh my god. Yeah. All the footage for my build is ruined because I've been testing with Boundless. Yeah. Everything before this is just Boundless.
A few moments later.
So I figured it out after some discussion. It was because Heavy Barrage used to scale better with more spirit power before the Giga nerfs. So that was why. Heavy Barrage got changed from 0.23 to 0.02. I thought it was 0.21 for some reason, but I don't know why I thought that. And there's also the T3 spirit scaling that made it more kill as a result. So yeah. Hi, this is me from the future, and the game just updated and it came out with a new item. So the video is even more bound now because the clips are going to be a mix of the new shop and the old one, and Boundless being taken over Escalating when Escalating is clearly better. So many people are going to be confused, and that's just fantastic. Yeah, that's just fan-fucking-tastic. Yeah, this is why people don't make full guides for an alpha game. Yeah. It's not like the game is going to change at a moment's notice, guys. So, Stamina Mastery, this is the best mobility option in the entire game for pretty much every hero in the game, and it's not even close. This item will allow us to continue beaming enemies with our ultimate, with more airtime, double air dashes, or jumps combined with wall jumps, so your mobility during ultimate is just... It's just an amazing chase tool to prevent enemies from escaping, and you can just become the escape artist yourself. Greater Expansion, your ult has a splash radius that you can visibly see. It's a giant circle on the ground, but it also has a vertical AoE that increases with ability range. Players trying to jump vertically away from the ultimate when you have more ability range becomes way harder. And this is why it's one of the most important purchases in the entire game for Ult McGinnis, because you literally cannot hit anyone who starts to double jump without ability range. They just double jump and your ult does 0 damage. So AoE is unskippable, but that doesn't mean stacking a lot of AoE is always good for you. Let me explain. So, Greater Expansion and ability range in general, basically the reason why we skip a lot of the other ability range items and prioritize Greater Expansion is for 2 reasons. The first one is item slot issues, and the second one is multiplicative ability range stacking has diminishing returns. Depending on the ability, of course. To make things easier to understand, I'd like you all to go watch one of my favorite deadlock YouTuber, Tism, on multiplicative stacking. I've left a timestamp for his video in relation to ability range, and I think everyone, including pro players, should watch this. So yeah, anyways, everyone should pretty much watch this video because Tism breaks down the video, or breaks down the math in a way that is pretty easy to understand even for someone like me who math isn't their strong suit. So after you have a better understanding of how multiplicative stacking works for pretty much everything in the game, including ability range, basically you have 30% ability range from Greater Expansion, and let's say you have Arcane Surge, which provides 12%. Your total ability range with these two combined will be 38.4%, an increase of 8.4%. If you add another 12% from, say, Cultist, that becomes 45.79%, or 46%, which is pretty significant in my opinion, but because of item slot restrictions, it becomes harder to justify buying 3 different ability range items when slots are so limited. Therefore, you really need to think about when you should be buying multiple ability range items. Also, ability range also works on turrets, so it's fan-flippin-tastic, so yeah, it's not bad. It's just that we don't have enough slots most of the time. Duration Extender, this item is for your ultimate, and it increases the duration of your ultimate, assuming you have the T2 upgrade at least, and no other duration items, from 14 seconds to 17.1 seconds, which is pretty significant. Superior duration applies to all of your abilities and items, which means that Unstoppable goes from 5.5 seconds to 7.04 seconds, which is a massive game-changing increase. Not only that, but superior duration when setting up turrets for mid-boss, base defense, or enemy-based sieging becomes incredibly valuable since turrets hit from so far away. They last a very long time as a result of this item. So Unstoppable, yeah, basically required in almost every single ult McGinnis game, because even if the enemy doesn't build to counter your ultimate, it still gives you massive safety from the fact that you cannot be CC'd and your ult will always go off for at least 7 seconds, with superior duration of course. Not to mention, not only that, but it also removes the slow penalty, or like the slow penalty applied by your ultimate to yourself, meaning you have full unrestricted movement, which is incredible at times. And most importantly, if you have Unstoppable, you should always use it before you use your ultimate, no matter what. Literally always, no matter what. The peak of the build is when you have Refresher. Refresher is best bought when your team is trying to end the game, and it will allow you to close out the game with 2 ults, 2 sets of walls which spawn 2 turrets each, and 2 sets of 6 or 7 turrets, which means it's possible to have at least 14 turrets up at a time, not even including the 4 temporary turrets spawned by the wall. You also have 2 heals, but the heal is kind of whatever, so it's not a big deal if you don't refresh your heal as opposed to your other 3 abilities. Look at all these turrets! Look at all these turrets! This is how you play! Superior cooldown is more of a base defense item, I would say, or like a mid-boss turret setup purchase along with rapid recharge, because you'll have more turret charges as a result of buying this item, since compressed cooldown was used on your ultimate early on. So this item is more of a situational flex buy depending on the circumstances. As I said, usually mid-boss or a base defense is the best options or the best time to purchase it, since for base sieges, so offensively, we generally have Refresher to summon another set of turrets. This is the cheap option, basically. And Rapid Recharge is the last significant item I will be talking about. And it basically is an item that you can purchase for 3 reasons. The first one is if your plan gets set up at mid-boss to take the Reju fight while there are turrets in every single direction, it makes it incredibly hard, and it makes it incredibly difficult for enemies to contest. Unless 7 ults, but the second reason is base defense. You want to place your turrets in a very niche position, so that it's hard for the enemies to kill every single one. You'll want to make enemies rotate their camera as much as possible to take full advantage of your turret-based defense.
Wait, you have so many turrets, what the fuck?
So the third reason to buy this item, other than mid-boss, is to siege the enemy base, where having multiple turrets alongside your walls to summon 2 more, while also having Refresher to place an entire set of turrets again, after using your ult, is just so satisfying and hard to deal with, unless, again, 7 ults. So in total, you'll have over 14 to 18 turrets if you min-max, for one instance, of course. Other niche items include Heal Bane, which is a nice pickup for anti-heal if your team already doesn't have 1 or 2. Metal Skin is a very important item against heavy gun damage like Viper, especially if you're running Unstoppable, since Viper can just 100 to 0 you if you don't have this item. So generally you want to pop Metal Skin and then Unstoppable and then just start ulting in Viper's face, teach that lizard a lesson. A Cultist Sacrifice is an okay purchase, but remember the multiplicative stacking discussion, so if you're buying more ability range, you should buy the Cultist not for the ability range, but to clear waves, because there's no other item in the game that actually gives us better wave clear than Cultist, not even Alchemical Fire. Okay, so Alchemical Fire, it's another instance of area denial, and it also makes the enemy team super susceptible to bullet damage, if that's a thing. Your allies will definitely benefit from that. The problem is it just doesn't last very long, and I think the best instance of Alchemical Fire being used to clear waves is when you're being pushed by a shit ton of enemy troopers. It doesn't really kill all of them. The troopers are still going to survive. So to that instance, I would say that Cultist might be slightly better. And the last thing I want to talk about, which nobody really knows about, is Veilwalker. If anyone ever mentioned this, or mentions this, it came from me. That is the secret strategy I've been holding on to for many heroes, but mainly McGinnis and Lash. For McGinnis, you can use Veilwalker before casting your ult and then stepping through, so you'll be invisible while firing your ult, becoming untargetable to stuff like Knockdown or Curse or whatever, assuming you keep your distance. I was going to save this for when I played Lash, but that hero is too boring, too easy, and one-dimensional. And I'll make one exception for the Lashback Foundation, so I will unveil the secret, and that is if you go invisible with Veilwalker before Majestic leaping through a veil, you will be invisible to enemies below you, as you're above them. Which makes it really hard for them to target you with knockdowns or any other kind of single target ability. So yeah, this works with a bunch of different heroes with channeled abilities, except Bebop, because, Bebop sucks, so yeah, it doesn't work for him. Sucks to suck, pal. And, well, it's actually possible for Bebop. He just needs an ally to, heal beam him through the veil after his entire ult comes out. He literally has to use his entire arm, and then his ult has to go off, and then you can pull him through the veil, but yeah, Bebop needs help. Pathetic. When to ult. Before you ever press your ultimate ability, you'll need to meet 2 out of 3 of these conditions. A. An open area without too much cover, so that if enemies decide to run for cover, you will have enough time to beam them with your ultimate. Only if you can get a minimum of 3 to 4 seconds of your ult on them. So basically, I'm just asking you to look at where the enemy is and ask yourself, am I going to be able to ult them for at least 4 seconds before they get to safety, or before they can use their escape ability? If the answer is yes, then use your ultimate and chase them down. B. At least one ally is already in the fight, fully distracting the enemy, because they have to deal with your ally in their faces. So just think of your allies as meat shields that are distracting the enemy so that you can get your ultimate off without them being able to deal with your allies and yourself. C. You are on higher ground than your enemy before ulting. You should always be looking to use your ultimate from high ground to low ground. The reason why is because your ultimate shoots in an arc, and often if you shoot from middle ground to middle ground or lower ground to middle ground, it is incredibly difficult to actually see where you are aiming, which is why you should avoid ulting from unsuitable positions like these and always try to use your ultimate from high ground whenever possible. If you meet 2 out of 3 of these conditions, use your ultimate. Now, if you meet 3 out of 3 of these conditions, assuming the enemy has no way to cancel your ult for 7 seconds, unstoppable, the enemy is usually screwed. You should always predict fights in advance as well. You should always predict fights in advance so you can set up on the high ground, hiding from enemies, only showing up when it's time to ult. This lets you catch enemies off guard, and since you are ulting from high ground to low ground, aiming your ultimate is also much easier and so much more responsive. The one thing you need to account for, other than enemy heroes, is the further away you are from the enemy during your ultimate, the longer it takes your ultimate to reach that location, because it is a projectile. So, it is a projectile. You will need to predict enemy movement the further away they are. Here are some examples of predicting fights in advance. So, urn fights. You know exactly where the urn is going to be, so you can set up in advance at these locations.
Spectral barrage. Going high. Giving hell. Releasing spirits. Fire!
Ideally, you take the left side of the map for the urn fights because you have significantly more buildings. You can ult from high ground to low ground. And since the area is way more exposed, we have a lot more ground where our ult is going to connect, making it super advantageous to contest urn on the left side, while the right side acts as a choke point for enemies because they don't have that same luxury. Like, there's a giant building that you can't even get on top of. It just blocks you from going up there, meaning you're trying to contest the enemy that's trying to dunk the urn while you're on the right side. That choke point will be the end of you and your team more often than not. Like, it's just really bad to not be on one of the buildings I mentioned before, since those buildings give full visibility of the urn area while you're kind of choked out on the right side of the map. So I don't like taking fights from that position because of that choke point I mentioned earlier, but if you can somehow get to the high ground position, like, the buff area is one position you can take, but it is often contested, but you should just try to get up there anyways, because if you have greater expansion, your ult can actually reach the urn area, so. Slow resist from Enduring Speed or Fleetfoot's active works during McGinnis' ult, which means the movement penalty is reduced, and you move quicker as a result. This applies to dashing and sliding, meaning you dash and slide further thanks to slow resist. You can wall jump during your ultimate, but it is a slowed jump, aka less velocity. And slow resist lets you wall jump with more velocity. You can also dash during your ultimate, but it is a slowed dash. I'm sure you're seeing a pattern here, but slow resist lets you dash with more velocity. You can slide during your ultimate, and while you slide, you do not suffer as much from the slow penalty, as we discussed. So the best way to move during ult early on is dash into slide. So sliding is key. Anything that allows you to perform a slide will allow you to move more optimally. For example, you can grab the zipline during your ult and then let go of the zipline, not jump, let go, it's a different key, then use that momentum to dash and or slide to keep chase. You can also mantle during your ultimate and follow up with a mantle slide, and then you can use the momentum from sliding to close the gap on enemies. Stamina Mastery makes it significantly easier to move around, especially during your ultimate. Your normal air dashes, even outside of your ultimate, go further, in addition to having double air dashes, double jumps, and mix and wall jumps in between. Pretty much all basic or advanced movement like side air dashing, bunny hopping, air strafing. It all works in your ultimate, it's just slightly slower, which can be somewhat fixed with slow resist. Not entirely, like a little bit, but it helps a lot. And as you already know, slow resist and sliding is your best movement friends. So should you learn how to incorporate all these basic to advanced movement techniques, this is what it will look like.
Can we look guys right now?
Turns up. Petrified. Turns online. I can't let the turns have all the fun.
There's 4 on Drifter.
That's okay. Heavy barrage mechanics. Your ult has splash radius that you can visibly see, which is a giant circle on the ground, and that circle can become bigger with more ability range. But not only does the circle on the ground become bigger, but also the verticality called the explosion radius, which you can see is on the ability itself, meaning you can splash nearby buildings, and if there happens to be, say, a Vindicta floating too close to the building, your ultimate can deal that splash damage to her as she is flying. Technically, this means you can hit flyers, but in reality you're dealing splash damage to them for being too close to a wall or building. Explosion radius scales with ability range at a lower rate, so if you want more ability range, you'll need to sacrifice more item slots. after Greater Expansion for diminished ability range, which will grant you the explosion radius, but it will be diminished, just like ability range, which may or may not be worth it. Sometimes Heavy Barrage bugs out and just deals 0 damage, so you should just stop ulting immediately and start shooting. There's nothing you can do about this, but there are rumors that this can happen more often if you are sliding and you activate your ult at the exact same time, among other things, but nothing concrete. So, you know, if this happens, what can you do? You should be looking to kill heroes that don't have much spirit resist, because if they have a crap ton of spirit resist, you won't really make a dent in them unless you use the full duration of your ultimate on top of them, which it isn't exactly a waste, but you could be killing more heroes that can die in a few seconds rather than an entire 17-second duration ultimate, assuming they even let you ult for that long. So try to assess whether the other 5 players have lower spirit resist and if they can be targeted with your ultimate, and whether they're a flying character or not. Since you can't use items during your ult, you generally need to rely on your allies to lock down targets with, say, slowing Hex, so like Wraith doesn't just teleport out of your ult during a team fight, or someone Phantom strikes the Vindicta, so you can kill her while she's grounded. It definitely does rely a bit on your teammates to at least get some lockdown for escape heroes. Try asking for your teammates to do this while you're ulting. Your ult cools down as you are using it, even though you can't see it. What do you do if your ult is on cooldown? You can do one of 2 things. The first one is if you are not Hybrid McGinnis, which does not have any gun items, you can still stick around and shoot your gun in conjunction with your turrets, but it will be more like dealing chip damage to the enemy, while also acting as a distraction. I'm not asking you to go stand next to enemies and die, by the way. What I'm saying is, this is something pretty advanced, which requires you to know your limits and the enemy's limits, meaning you already need to know before you go in that you can go in and absorb some spells. This is a very hard thing to do. I actually think only like 5% of players will be able to do this efficiently, so assess the situation, otherwise play it safe, which leads me to the second option. The second thing you can do is understand that your ult is on cooldown, your turrets are pretty much all out, and wall's already been used. In that case, tell your team, I have nothing, I'm out, and just leave and go push away. Both are situational, so I can't tell you what is the right or wrong answer because it just depends. So if this is something you need to decide as a player, so choose wisely. Lastly, your ult cools down as you are using it, even though you can't see it. How to use turrets in lane. To effectively use turrets in lane, you need to have a goal in mind before using them. The most common usage I have for turrets is using them to push the wave. Generally, I use them in a way that allows them to attack troopers while making it as hard as possible for the enemy to kill them. The real goal is to push the wave, so even if the enemy kills it,
Buffs after this wave.
yeah, I'm gonna try and depush it, and farms it for souls. The real objective was to, 1, push the wave, and 2, distract them for as long as possible, so you can kill the wave while they deal with the turret. Denying the turret the soul is ideal, but sometimes you just need to focus on killing the enemy troopers while they kill your turret for wave advantage, or to neutralize an incoming push. Basically, enemies won't ignore turrets because they're worth a decent amount of souls, but they recently did get nerfed. So it's more worth it to use these turrets to accomplish these goals, rather than use them as a damage source. Otherwise, turret damage does add up, so they don't want to be tanking it either. You can use your body to block shots from the enemy to stall the turret's death, especially if you are near max health. This is actually a big deal when enemies refuse to interact with you, and mostly just try to farm your turrets from afar. A lot of the time, you can just make them overextend, because they think they're going to kill the turret, secure the soul, and then they think they can just back off with minimum damage or interaction. But here comes me being incredibly annoying, stalling the turret death, watching them take extra damage. I mean, you also take some extra damage, but it's fine if you know when it's okay to do this. So yeah, it's super annoying for the enemy if you do this. Monster rounds do not affect turrets whatsoever. This means you do not take reduced damage to turrets, nor do you deal extra damage to turrets with monster rounds. As for turret targeting, it seeks targets based on their distance to an enemy unit within line of sight. If turrets are attacking whatever, troopers, guardians, objectives, they will not stop attacking their target until it dies. The only way to force turrets to switch targets is if McGinnis herself starts to shoot an enemy hero with her gun, and if the turrets have line of sight, they will switch targets. Unfortunately, you cannot make them switch from attacking an enemy hero to guardians or troopers or other objectives. So, if you want them to attack something other than enemy heroes, place them based on their distance to that target, and avoid shooting enemy heroes with your gun. If you do shoot an enemy hero, just remember they won't switch back to the objective until that hero is dead. Also, you may have noticed, but turrets only deal half or 50% of their damage to troopers or neutrals, while only dealing 30% to objectives like guardians, walkers, mid-boss, etc. This makes them pretty bad for farming or clearing waves on their own, especially because you have to place turrets behind troopers or they'll just die a lot of the time, but they still secure half the souls for troopers, even if you aren't nearby, which is still a little bit useful. Additionally, turrets have 80% damage resistance that decays over 6 seconds, while also having 35% melee resist that does not decay at all, so it's just there forever. You can take full advantage of this by using turrets to absorb damage for the first few seconds. Sometimes, players unaware of these facts will often try to melee or shoot the turret, only to end up taking more damage because they aren't waiting out the 6-second decay period for the damage reduction to wear off completely before they're at their easiest to deal with. Now, I'm pretty sure almost nobody knows about this next part, and it's also the reason I don't ever use turrets next to guardians to force them to use their melee attacks. Normally you'd think, oh yeah, it's a good idea to force the guardian to use their melee attacks, it stalls their normal range attack. Well, you'd be wrong. Take a look at what happens here. What you see happening on screen is that turrets are getting automatically executed, like Shivzel, by the Guardian, only if they are hit by the Guardian's melee attack, and if turret health goes exactly under 1 health bar. This also applies to walkers, but only their Stomp and Fireball ability can execute turrets within 1 health bar threshold. The initial Fireball burst executes them, but the afterburn damage over time does not execute the turrets. Using turrets offensively is all about making enemies turn their cameras as much as possible. For example, if I want to push the middle Guardian with my turrets, I would summon 1 turret on the left side that can attack the Guardian, or it's just out of the Guardian range, so it attacks only enemy troopers or heroes that come into range. You do the same thing for the opposite side, depending on the situation and what your goal is. Generally, I have 1 hidden turret and 1 or 2 active turrets hitting the Guardian, effectively zoning the enemies depending on your and your allies' position. Again, the goal is to make them turn their cameras as much as possible, so if they want to deal with the turret and you shooting them / your ally shooting them, it'll be pretty difficult for them. Using your turrets defensively is mostly about placing them behind your Guardian or at angles that are really annoying for them to kill. While the turrets can still kill troopers, this makes it so that it's hard for them to dive you while giving a decent amount of damage. This makes it so it's hard for them to dive you while buying you a lot of time, especially if they take time to clear them. If it looks like enemies want to dive or force the Guardian with numbers, you can still wall as a last resort. Ideally, you wall off the enemies from their troopers, so you kill their troopers and stall the push, because they aren't going to push if they have no troopers. They're going to take too much damage from the Guardian. How to use turrets mid to late game. For mid-boss, if you are allowed to set up all your turrets with rapid recharge in the pit, spreading them evenly so that AoE abilities or ricochet won't bounce between them will make mid-boss incredibly annoying for enemies to deal with because they won't be able to kill all your turrets in an efficient manner, unless, 7 presses is ult. This is a general representation of how I place my turrets to make them as annoying as possible.
Wait, you have so many turrets. What the fuck?
Down there.
You can also place them inside veils, so that if 7 ults, he or other enemies in line of sight will still get shot, since 7 ult doesn't pierce the veils. So you have a little bit of counterplay for 7, which is better than all of your turrets dying instantly, if you expect that to happen. Here are turret placements for offensive-based sieges. Turrets have very high attack range with greater expansion, and while they might not deal that much damage, they're very annoying, which is the goal when placing these turrets. Their damage, however, does add up, so they can't be underestimated in numbers. Here are turret placements for base defense against rejuve enemies. You want to place your turrets in a way that doesn't expose them from getting killed unless the enemy is inside your base. This setup of turrets makes enemies who dive into your base carelessly will get punished by not only your turrets, but also your teammates while they have turrets as backup. The enemies won't be able to focus both turrets from their camera position below and our teammates at the same time, creating a niche little choke, which is super annoying, since again, the turret damage does add up, especially if all of them are hitting one target. Lastly, here are some unique turret placements. You can place turrets in many places that, reach the skybox limit, or, requires stamina mastery, or just a double jump to place at the highest point, but, there are so many places, and I just can't show all of them. If you want to learn more about these turret placements, like I said, I won't record them all, but there's just way too many. But you can watch me on twitch.tv/Elendilli. I'll leave a link below, and you can just follow me and ask me, since I'm looking for new spots and new tech every day. I know quite a few spots. How to use wall. Before I teach everyone how to use wall, there are a few things you need to understand about its mechanics and undocumented changes. Around the time Billy was released as a character, the wall got a secret update where it could no longer interact with physical objects. And that fixed something called auto-popping, which was a bug for McGinnis that just popped your wall instantly and there was nothing you could do. So this update made it so that walls can officially no-clip through walls. And this was a big deal because there were a lot of walls just full of auto-pop bugs that were out of your control. But at the same time, we got another undocumented secret update to wall, which would change the course of this ability for the worst. Lag compensation. Valve had added a mechanic into the game that basically compensated for lag, and while I'm unaware of how lag comp strictly works for wall, I can tell you with absolute certainty that wall, as a result of being affected by lag compensation, is now one of the hardest abilities to trap players in comparison to before. You'll notice that players look like they are teleporting through your wall, and it wouldn't be completely false to say that largely accurate on your screen or client, but the server is communicating with something completely different for the player that you thought was trapped, but in reality they just narrowly avoided the trap, thus looking like they teleported through it. While this explanation may be accurate to what is happening, it's still unfair, because McGinnis Wall it's just so difficult to know whether players are trapped or if they teleported out, and you don't gain this information usually until it's too late. When players teleport through the wall, you're notified at a very later time, and it's incredibly unfair. Like, you just have no time to deal with it, and you're usually just dead. And so here are a few pointers I've learned to effectively trap players, knowing that most of the time they will just escape as a result of lag compensation. Overcompensating for the wall. Overcompensating your wall means that you will let your wall continue for a bit longer before manually popping it to trap targets. This unfortunately does not work as well as you'd think, because I've seen players still quote-unquote teleport through it, because even after compensating, but it's still more reliable than just barely being able to trap players, which hardly ever works anyways. The second thing you need to know about wall is how the wall spawns. Wall spawns from the middle portion at first, then slowly makes its way outwards to the left and right side, meaning there's a bit of a time delay before it hits players on the far left and far right of the wall. Essentially, this means trapping players who are not at the center is even harder, and you must account for this time delay in addition to accounting for lag compensation via overcompensation. You can use the wall to block the walker's stun while simultaneously being able to shoot or melee it because its hitbox is gigantic. This is the wall plus dash jump technique. This tech allows the wall to close behind you as you dash jump, essentially giving you a soft escape. The tech can fail though for a few different reasons other than timing it incorrectly. If you have too much ability range, like greater expansion, if you are slowed, whether it's a movement slow or a dash slow, either can prevent you from getting enough speed to clear the wall. The center part of the wall is what determines the elevation at which the wall will follow or disappear into the void, because it has no terrain left to follow at that elevation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's nothing you can really do if it fails. Just try to take note and avoid using wall in that area in the future. The last thing I'd like to talk about is how to actually use it strategically in lane. Wall is what many consider an ability that can control the area, and this is incredibly beneficial in lane at the start of the game to control your wave or the enemy wave.
Buffs after this wave.
Yeah, I'm going to try and deep-push it. For example, at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, the last set of troopers will come spawning before 5-minute buff spawns. For McGinnis to secure this buff, all you need to do is wall off the enemy heroes from the troopers. So the troopers will be walled off, and the enemy heroes will be on the opposite side. As a player in control of the waves, you can either go help with the buff or stay in lane depending on your mid or side lane situation. Personally, I like holding the wave I like holding on to wall, because I can just spam 2 turrets to force push the wave before objectives, like the 5-minute buff, leaving me with the benefit of saving the wall. This is basically just using your area control abilities in turrets or wall to secure objectives, which is the exact same thing you do with wall in the mid-boss pit before the rejuve starts to drop, which gives you one of the most powerful mid-boss secure abilities in blocking out players who take the wrong path. This ability is really nice, even though it's a different use case compared to the old one that gave fire rate. As you get more spirit, your base heal also increases, so it's pretty consistent for its healing throughout the game, especially in lane for buying spirit items. It's just that it's hard to justify maxing heal when the other 3 abilities are just way better, especially for this build. The 40% spirit resist that this ability grants is cool, but most of the time, you're going to use it to sustain in lane as opposed to using it to tank spirit damage, which means you'll need to change your approach on how to use it sometimes. Instead of using it to heal yourself when you're missing health, you'll need to purchase items to keep your health topped, so that when the time comes, you can just plant the healing specter and tank whatever amount of incoming spirit damage is coming your way. This ability is really nice, even though it's a different use case compared to the old one that gave fire rate. I generally just plop it on my team, or if a situation goes bad, I save it for myself, just in case I need some insurance if they all jump me or I get hate crime. If I do get jumped, then I'll be absorbing a lot of damage while resisting a crap ton of spirit damage. As for my teammates, I usually just plop it for objectives like the earn deposit area, mid-boss as the rejuve drops down, or the enemy base. I sometimes just throw it down to my teammates while I maintain my high ground position. Healing Spectre no longer gives turrets 30% fire rate, because max level turrets now have that 30% fire rate, meaning there's less reasons to use your heal on the turrets themselves unless you want to give them spirit resist. This also makes it harder to justify buying items like healing tempo anymore, because previously you could just give your entire team 75% total fire rate, including turrets. It used to be an all-purpose purchase, but since fire rate got removed from the heal, gun has felt really bad, and quite a few healing tempo / gun / utility / support builds have died as a result. So basically, this just means that heal is the least valuable ability on ult / turret McGinnis builds because we need the other three abilities a lot more. This ult build has already been swamped for slots, so it would be ideal if somebody else purchased, Heroic Aura or Healing Tempo and could apply them to your turrets, instead of you going out of your way to purchase these two items. I will say though that Heroic Aura is definitely purchasable and is very good, but Healing Tempo, it's gonna be a no from me. So with the big patch underway, I will be creating a lot more new builds for McGinnis, and other characters too, but it's just that nobody really knows when I put out new builds, because you have to type in the first 4 letters of my name and then manually check if I have a guide, and that unfortunately is how the current guide system works, so you'll need to regularly check for ELEN in the search box, because this is the only way to stay updated on the latest build technology, because, well, let's just say I already have a lot of builds prepared, depending or based on what type of buffs or nerfs we'll see. I mean, I just haven't streamed for the past 2 months because this video took 2 months to make, so I mean, I fully expect that in the new patch that's about to come, right as my video drops, that there's definitely gonna be changes that just ruin sections and sections of this video, but it is what it is. It's what I signed up for, I guess. I'll have to make corrections regarding that, so look forward to that. Subscribe.
Now!
Action is coming.